Welcome back to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, and this is my good friend. Sometimes lover, sometimes hugger, sometimes snuggler. Ty Franck. Say hello, Ty.
Hello, Ty.
Ty, this might be the best goddamn episode of the season.
As I said last time, this is my favorite piece of the game, and I loved it. I thought they did a great job with it, and I still feel the way I felt after the last episode, that I wish they had given this chunk 2 episodes rather than just 1.
So the game had all of these storytelling elements in it?
It actually had quite a bit more.
Well, Jesus Christ, I'm going to play some damn games.
Yeah.
We've came a long way since Mario Brothers.
Yeah. So they added a couple of little elements to David to flesh him out a little bit. The preacher. They did add some stuff for him in the show that I thought was good. I liked that they added it. But so in the game, I mean, obviously this is not a podcast about the game. This is a podcast about the show. But to set up my comment, in the game, what happens is Joel gets hurt,
and everybody knows spoilers.
Spoilers for everything. Spoilers for the game. Spoilers for the show. Spoilers for what's in Wes's underpants. All of it.
Hopefully, it's not stinky.
But in the game, what happens is Joel gets hurt, and I mentioned this last time, he gets hurt, and it's the fall. And then when we cut back to them, it's the winter. So we know months have passed, and there's snow on the ground. So when we come back to him, he's recovering, but he's been in recovery for at least weeks and maybe months. And Ellie is out hunting for food, just like she does in the show. So she goes out and she hunts. And the same thing that happens in the show happens in the game, where she runs into the David and the other guy. Well, by the way, the other guy is the guy who is the voice of Joel from the game. She says, "Go get me some penicillin and I'll give you the meat." Just like in the show. And so all of that stuff is the same. Now, where it diverges, and this is the point I'm getting to, is while the other guy is gone, Ellie and David have a conversation. And while they're having that conversation, they're hanging out in that sort of like factory warehouse thing that they take shelter in. And it turns out that there's infected in there. And infected start attacking them. And so you wind up, you're playing Ellie during this. You wind up cooperating with David to defeat the infected that attack. And so you get much more a sense of like being on his team, and you guys protect each other. You save each other's lives multiple times during that sequence. And so it really builds up this connection between the two. Anyway, so you get this much more connected thing. And then when they track Ellie back to her hideout with Joel, like it happens in the show, there's a much more extended sequence of her escaping on the horse and trying to draw them away from Joel. And when she gets captured, now once she gets captured and she's in that freezer and breaks out and has to fight David in that burning restaurant, that is very much like the game. That whole sequence is very much like the game. The piece that they've cut out, which I think was a smart move. So there's another gameplay piece where Joel wakes up. You have the sequence where he kills the guys who are coming after him, and then he goes through the town to find where Ellie is, which is much more of a gameplay sequence where he's actually fighting people in the town and a bunch of that. And they cut almost all of that out, which I think was the right thing to do. But the pieces that I missed, because getting to play as Ellie was such a big deal in the game, and it really gave you much more of a connection to her and her survivability, and much more built up that sequence at the end where she has to fight David all by herself. Now, all of this was great, and we'll go through the whole episode and stuff. So I'm not bagging on the episode. The only thing I wish is that we had done the first half of the story in one episode and the second half of the story in a second episode. Like if we had done the story, if we had Ellie and David fight against some infected together, and then the end of the first episode is her taking off on the horse and them going after her trying to draw Joel away, and then the next episode was all the stuff with Joel in the in his recovery and her evading the guys and then eventually getting captured and all that stuff. I would have preferred that, but the episode we did get is fucking great.
Like, I know we'll go back from the beginning, go from the episode, but I just want to say in the game, when her and David are fighting zombies, does he gain her like trust? Because she's sitting there with a gun on him.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, they wind up having to trust each other.
And so that's kind of and because in the episode it was more his skill at manipulation to kind of get in there.
Yeah.
This was extremely well written, well directed, and extremely well acted. Every moment had tension, had mystery. You didn't know what was going to happen next. There was constant reversals. And then the reversals, when you look at it, you're like, oh, yeah, it was there all along. Yeah. It was fantastic. This was my favorite episode of the season.
And I knew it would be, because I've been saying from almost the beginning of us doing this podcast, we're coming up to my favorite part of the game. I knew this would be a great episode. I knew this would be one of your favorites, because when you're playing the game, this is one of the best parts of the entire game.
So my question is, and what I was going to say to you is, because it's so good and it's so well done, story point from story point and all sequences are the same as the game?
No, well, I mean, no, it's not exactly the same, but it is, I would say 80%.
Wow, man, what if I got to play this fucking game?
It is, as I have said multiple times, it is the best written game I've ever played. It's the game that most felt like playing through a movie or playing through a TV show. Right. It's incredibly well written, which is why when I saw that they were making the show and I saw that Neil Druckmann had been part of the writing team on the show, I was not surprised at all, because my reaction to that was, he's a fucking great writer. I'm glad they included him.
Right. Yeah. You know, when we start off on this barren landscape, it's like the winter of our discontent, and we're going in. It's fucking cold. You know, sometimes you watch films like The Revenant, and you're like, it makes you cold. Like, you know that it's fucking cold.
I'm imagining it, and I'm actually feeling cold right now.
It's like the ground is just cracking with cold, and you can tell when actors are fucking cold, and the actors in this are fucking cold.
Well, they're up north of Calgary somewhere in Canada, and they're buried in snow. So yeah, I bet it was fucking freezing up there.
Fictionally, they're in Colorado, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, it's like the apex of their greatest challenge, this episode. It's like foreshadowing their bleakest challenge within this episode. Joel has been sewed up, but you don't know whether he's alive. He's kind of coming in and out of consciousness and everything like that. And the roles have reversed a little bit, where Ellie is the one caring for him.
Yeah, she's protecting him now.
Yeah, she's protecting him.
Which is why I loved this sequence so much in the game, and I think it works really well in the show too, because we get to see Ellie being tough on her own and being tough enough to take care of him when he's hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's the contrast of how vicious she is in taking care of him, but how gentle she is with him. How she's, just dripping water in his mouth just to get water with her hands, and like feeding and, all these things. It's like the most gentle we've seen her. And the one of the things that I love about Ellie as a character is she's generally kind of pushing people away. Everybody's at arm's length. She's like, has this tough, vicious attitude. Yeah. But once you're in, and I've only, and it was the Storm Riley. Yeah. It was Riley in the last episode, and it's Joel. Yep. And once you're in, she is a Wolverine with loyalty. Like, she will protect you. She will do whatever it takes.
In that way, she and Joel are very much the same. In that way, they are very similar.
And then so all the challenges of freezing to death, trying to keep him alive. She needs food. Now, when she goes out, is she going out just for food, or does she know at some point she's got to get medicine too?
Well, I mean, they don't really say, but I think when she sees the infection on him, she knows she's going to have to find something. So she's going to have to go looking for penicillin or something.
The only false beat in this episode, and because I really praise the violence in this, and we'll get to it when we talk to it, but like it's so realistic, it's so grounded, and it's so consistent with the character and the thing around it. And you remember how we always talk about fight consistency and how it really bugs me? I'll get into that when we get to those scenes or whatever. But the only misbeat is TV show hunting. Like, in every TV show, it's like, oh, we need food, so I'm going to get a rifle, and I just randomly just trounce in the woods somewhere, and I just see all kinds of animals, and she's just walking in a straight line, and she sees a rabbit. She would be nowhere near that rabbit. She would be, that buck that she saw, she would be nowhere near. That thing would have been gone before she got anywhere close to it. But in TV show hunting,
I agree. I generally agree. However, I live in the counter argument to that. The deer and rabbits that live all around my house. We just had a family of 4 deer walk through my front yard. They're not scared of us. We can go outside. We can practically walk up to them. And what I'm wondering is, given how long the world has been in post-zombie lockdown,
that's a good point.
Are the animals starting to lose a little bit of their fear?
Well, so the thing is the reason that the animals aren't afraid of you is because humans, they've been around you guys. You guys haven't been a threat over time. Maybe some of them leave food out for the deer or whatever. But, you know, the reality is the more wild they get, the more apprehensive they get. And if it's a random thing that there's a human walking through the woods, they would hear that coming forever for a mile away, and they would be gone. But that is a good counterpoint, because there are times and situations, but I always find that that's when deer become socialized anyway. The reality, I just think, like, every time I see TV, they're like, throw the rifle on, just through the woods. There's a deer. It's like going to the supermarket, right? It's like, oh, I got to go get food and get the deer anyway.
Yeah, but watching somebody stalk a deer for 40 minutes is not good television.
Yeah. Well, it don't even have to like be that, but like just have, anyway. Yeah. And then we cut to, and we get to see Silver Lake, and we get to see David, and he's giving this prayer. Now, you were once a Bible scholar. Do you know what this passage is and like what the meaning behind it is? What is it?
I mean, I don't remember the exact chapter and verse. But I recognized the scripture when he was reading it.
Yeah. And do you know what the meaning behind it is?
The meaning that he was applying to it is that God knows what you need and will provide it for you.
Okay.
He's comforting them that even though the winter is very hard, they're running out of food, all of those things, and that apparently that girl's father has died, that they just have to stay faithful and God will provide what they need.
And to maintain faith.
Maintain faith.
Hardships.
And of course, we realize later the reason he's doing that, the sort of manipulation that's happening there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
David was played by an actor named Scott Shepherd, and he was very good. Yeah. This was a very good, sophisticated, complex performance that he gave. Yeah. Was the David in the game, did he have that same, was he more fleshed out in the show?
Okay, so the piece that they've added for the show, which I actually didn't mind, is this thing of him being a preacher. So in the game, David is just the leader of the community, but they don't give him any sort of that preacher piece. Isn't part of it. He's just the leader. I would say that he's much more nuanced in the show. In the game, he comes across as a little creepy. Yeah, just the performance, he comes across as a little creepy. You know when somebody is so obsequious they become off-putting?
Yeah.
He's like that. He's so obsequious that you're like, there's something going on here. And then when the reveal of what he's actually after comes out, you're like, yeah, I knew it. I knew what this fucking guy was up to.
Yeah. And that's the sign of a smart actor, because you can make two choices. You could go like, I'm creepy guy, twist a mustache, or you can play the thing that covers that up. Or you could just go full on, sweetheart of a guy, and then you flip, but there's a false note hit. It was almost like, where you weren't playing all things at once, right?
Yeah. And the difference is, in the game, he can be a little creepier because they're going to force you into a cooperative situation with him, which is going to have the effect of making you trust him more. They don't have that moment in this show.
This one, you have to trust him because of his personality.
Yeah.
And he had to go there. But what's interesting is he's giving this sermon. Basically, somebody just died. The little girl's crying. He's comforting this little girl, but it's a contrast. This town is like a contrast from, I think it was called Jacksontown, other town that they were in, Jackson. And it's almost like, I always think that we were talking about leadership in the last show and how important it is and how it filters down. It's like you go through Jacksontown and you get a feeling of like wholesome. Like, this is a normal place. They got their shit together. Food's coming. It's a bustling town. Yeah. Laws. They got shit working on.
Schools. They're teaching their kids.
Schools and like horses in the thing, and they're, fires and like warm. And then you're here and it's like something is off. Something is underneath the surface is ominous. Yeah. And there's a bit of like tension and mystery.
All the people look a little scared.
Yes. They look a little scared. They look unhealthy. and there's something off-putting about him. Now there's moments where you're like, well, is he a good guy? Like he kind of leans into that, but it's always shifty. It's a performance.
When he smacks the shit out of that little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's like, what the fuck?
Don't jump ahead. Yeah. But what's interesting is like, were they in the game? Were they like a white supremacist kind of? Because you think about the Jackson town when everybody's there, it's like all multiple diversity, ethnicities, everybody's living there, men, women, everything. And this one is like, it's all sickly looking white people.
In the game, they are not. And I don't know that they were implying that this community was in the show, but it definitely was noticeable how monochromatic the community was. And I don't know if that was a deliberate choice or was implying something else.
I feel like everything in this episode, everything has a choice. Everything is there for a reason. That's like, it's very well designed in that way. It's saying something. Like there is a system in Jackson that is thriving, and then there's a system in this town that is not thriving. And you're connecting the dots and figuring out what it is.
Well, and the other pretty dramatic difference is you get the sense in Jackson that it is a community that is as democratic as it is possible for a post-apocalyptic community to be. That clearly decisions are made by consensus with multiple leaders meeting to talk about things and come to a consensus on things. Whereas in this community, it is one guy. He's the cult leader.
It's a patriarch. Yeah.
Yeah. He's the guy who decides everything for everybody.
Yeah.
And that feels very different as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And he says and you start to kind of be tipped off when they go out. I think his name was James. Is that the guy, David's right-hand man? Is his name James?
I think that's right.
Oh, so he's James. That's the guy that plays Joel in the
that's
video
Troy
game.
Baker. Yeah.
He was really good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. So when they made Last of Us the game, they hired real actors to voice act the parts, which is part of what made the game so good. Is it was very well voice acted. So it doesn't surprise me that when they're putting people from the game in the show, they're good in the show too.
Yeah,
because that other episode, the guy Perry is one of the voice actors from the game. So that's not surprising me at all.
Yeah, and I didn't say it to imply like I was surprised that the guy. I was saying it to just acknowledge like he's very good in this. Like he, the conflict that he had. He was informing me that something is off with this leader because he was carrying around a lot of doubt about this guy, and you see it through him. And that creates mystery, and I love that. I love when the mystery and suspense is pulling you through, and every moment within this is reversing and going back and forth, and there's mystery and suspense drenched in every moment going forward.
Well, and I felt like the character James gave me two conflicting perspective, which I thought was good. I got the sense that he is having some doubt, that he is not entirely feeling like this guy is doing all the right things. But I also got the sense from him that he believes that the only reason the community has survived as long as it has is because of that guy. And so you have this loyalty twisted up with doubt.
Yeah.
And I felt both of those things coming off of his performance, which is a really, really subtle performance.
Yeah. I mean, look, the character development and the way that this is written, it's so complex, so interesting, but everything is clear. You understand it, and as things are evolving and as things are revealing themselves, you are captivated along with the ride. We talk about all the time, like a great dramatic situation to be in, and this was a really good situation. I love those situations that just story pours out of it, and it just propels you forward. So she shoots a deer. David and James are out hunting. They get to the deer before she does. And they're about to take it. She draws the gun on them.
Yep.
And they need the food. And then she finds out they have medicine.
Yeah.
And, which is penicillin, by the way, which is a fungus, which is kind of, there's an irony to that, right? That she used it to say that.
Yep.
And I was really captivated by this whole situation, you know, and in retrospect, like looking back, I feel as if David wanted her right away. He saw like the fierceness. What was that thing? She said, I'll put one between your eyes. And you too, buddy boy, or something like that. She's talking about the guy next to him, and you can see him respond to like, look at this spirit. Like, look at this. He makes that decision. He says, go get the medicine.
Yeah. And I like that he says, this isn't code. Actually go get it. And one of my favorite lines in the whole show, and an Ellie line, she's sitting there, she's got the gun on him. He says, you shouldn't be out here by yourself. And she says, from where I'm sitting, you shouldn't be out here by yourself. I'm not the one with the gun pointed at me.
Yeah. Right. And that was a masterful buildup to the climax of then him revealing that he knows who she is.
And that is almost line for line from the game. When that moment in the game is a chilling moment. And I love that they brought it into the show too, where they're sitting there and he says, I think everything happens for a reason. And then he tells the story about the 4 guys who went out looking for supplies and how one of them was killed, and that the guy who killed him was traveling with a little girl. And when you're playing the game, you're like, shit. Like, shit's about to pop off now. And they played it perfectly in the show. And it is just as chilling. Even though I knew the story from the game, watching it on the show, it was just as chilling, that moment. And she realizes she's in big trouble.
Right. And everything is going, they sit down, they have this conversation, and he's so good and warm. And you're like, well, maybe he isn't a creep. Maybe he is a good guy. Maybe he is this. And then he builds up to that moment, and then the guy comes in with the gun, and then you're like, fuck, they got her. But he's like, put the gun down. Put the gun down. How does she escape that situation again? She takes the medicine.
Yeah, she leaves the deer. She takes the medicine and she runs off.
So they bring the deer back, and there's just this subtle moment where they bring in a big glass container full of meat. And he goes, it's venison. And you're like, yeah, it's venison. They just had the deer. But then they cut to, they're dragging the deer through the front thing. And so in my mind, it was just something that was like off. And then I just went through it. I was like, okay, I just kind of noted it, but I just went through it, which is so great how you subtly, introduce that thing. And then it goes, because later when she's in jail and she sees that ear, you immediately flash back to, oh my God, they're eating people. You don't even need to explain it. It's been tipped off when she just sees the ear.
And your mind also flashes back to that other girl saying, can we bury my dad? And David's saying, no, the ground's too frozen. We'll bury him when it gets warmer. Yeah. I mean, like all of that. Now here's another difference between the game and the show is in the show, they imply that only David and a couple others know about what they're doing with the cannibalism. In the game, they definitely make it seem more like everyone in the community just knows and is just a cannibal. And I think the reason for that is because you're going to wind up fighting and killing a bunch of people in that community in the game. They want to make you feel okay about that. Since in the show, they're not going to have you killing everybody in that community. I like that they kept it like this was David's decision. He included a couple of people in it, but he's trying to keep the rest of the community in the dark.
Yeah, that's it. It's a smart choice. And then and another thing you flash back to is when he's sitting down with that big old plate of food around everybody, and he's just chowing down. He knows what it is, but he doesn't give a shit. Yeah, he's just fucking chowing down, and he's the one guy that knows what it is in the whole group. And so she makes it back to Joel. She gives him the penicillin. She doesn't know what the fuck to do, so and I mean, like the emotional roller coaster, she's starving, she's freezing. The one lifeline, the one connection that she has in this world is dying, and it's on her shoulders to try to keep him alive, and she has no fucking idea what she's doing. It gives him that penicillin, and I love the moment when she's outside and how to signal that they're coming is these birds get spooked. They fly out of a tree, and right then that they're on their way.
And she didn't make any attempt to hide her trail. She just ran back because she was so focused on getting the medicine to Joel that she's not taking those other precautions, So, of course, the minute she sees that people are coming, she knows who it is. She knows it's them.
Yeah, and when, right before dinner, when David is right before dinner and he brings in the thing and he goes, look, I know you guys heard the rumors. We found the girl. We're going to bring the guy to justice. And she was like, you should kill them both. and he slaps the shit out of that little girl, slaps her out of the fucking chair. And I mean, you're like, whoa. And I thought about this because when I first saw that, I was like, do you tip it? Did that tip it off too soon? But I think it's pretty smart of what they did, because you're just tipping off just enough that something is off with this guy. But there's many layers to how fucked up this guy is. And you're just seeing that first layer. And when he slaps the shit out of that girl, then you now fear for what he's going to do to Ellie. So then it adds that tension of when they're coming to get her, because if they didn't tip that off yet, and you're like, well, he's not that bad of a guy, you know, and then but now they're trucking through the street. And I like that, you know, these are amateurs. These are not soldiers. I like how they're just trucking through, walking down the road. Like, they're going to get a guy that just murdered one of their guys. They're wide open in the daylight, walking down the middle of the road. You know, and these aren't commandos. And Ellie sees it and gets the jump on them. And then there's that, and then she goes back. And again, you know, this is like, you know, starting off with the winter and their bleakest challenge, and really pushing to the very limits of what they're going to go through. And when she goes back, it's like, Jesus Christ, like the shit that she's going through right now. And she's like, gives him a knife. And like, if they come in here, you fucking kill them, you know, gets on her horse. And at the time you're trying to figure out, what does she do? When she goes out, she just starts blazing at them to get to take them away from Joel. And that like amount of loyalty and toughness and like fierce protection of Joel, it just endears you to her. Yeah.
And this is Janae's least favorite part, because she's watched me play the game too. She likes watching the game because it is so very cinematic, you know. Her least favorite part is when the horse gets shot. And she gets, when I was playing the game and she was like, they're not going to shoot that horse, are they? And I'm like, I know it's coming, you know, I don't say anything. And then when the horse gets shot and Ellie goes flying off, she got so mad. She's so mad. And when we're watching the show, she's like, oh my God, it's that part. I remember this part. They're going to shoot the horse, aren't they? She was so mad.
You know, but you watch that and you're like, Ellie, just take the rifle and pick them off. You know where they are. They don't know where you are.
She's not a great shot, though. Like, she was surprised she hit that deer. Yeah. Like when she hit the deer, she was like, whoa, no way.
Yeah, and it obviously wasn't in the right spot, because the deer ran for a long time. But she just starts shooting at them and drawing them off. They shoot the horse and they take her away. And then we get to, you know, he saves her. He brings her back. Now these guys are going after Joel. And what's great about this moment for me, I kept hearing, you would hear stories about like, you know, Joel's done bad things. Joel can be a bad guy. Joel's this. But I was looking at this and I was like, I haven't fully saw that side of him yet. And I haven't seen, what is it about him that he survived so long when so many hasn't? And what are people referring to? Well, you see it in this episode. And, you know, there is, you know, some people are talking about Amos, and I can understand it because he is definitely in that place. So what I love about this, it's not like John Wick, right? It's not like John Wick where he's like,
yeah, he's not a jujitsu gun kata guy.
Yeah, a gunfight. He is what Gene Hackman was talking about in Unforgiven when he's talking to the reporter. And he was saying, you want to see how fast I can draw my gun? Does it, pulls it out. He's like, it's not that fast. But there are some people that have another gear when the shit goes down and when the violence hits the fan, where they can stay calm and cool, and they go into doing whatever they're going to have to do to survive. They can do the math quicker than people that are emotionally flooded in the brain. There's a thing they talk about with fighters where there's some fighters that are just gifted, extremely talented. When they're in the gym, they call them gym heroes. They can fuck everybody up. But then when they're under the lights and the people are watching, the people cheering, and when they get tested, when they get pushed to the limit, and there's something in them that folds, that breaks. And then there's some people that aren't that great at the gym. They're not that disciplined. They don't work out that hard. But when they get under those lights and when they get tested, they have a fifth gear where this fucking animal comes out. And Joel and Ellie have those animals. And David recognizes that animal in Ellie. And that's what he's attracted to.
And he's also a creepy pervert who likes likes him young.
Yeah.
Which leads to my second favorite line in the show when we get to it. But yeah, and Joel isn't like karateing that guy who comes down into the basement.
No, he stabs him in the fucking neck, like from behind. He got the jump on him. Yeah, which is real. Which is like you and I talk about all the time, like fight consistency. Like be consistent to your character and be consistent to the world that you're in. This is very raw, realistic violence. Besides the fact that there's zombies and shit like that, but you know what does he do? He hides. He gets the jump on him. He's not fighting fair. He stabs him, brings him to the ground. The other guys, he fakes them out, gets the jump on them, and he ties them to the chair. And then he was stone cold ruthless in these moments.
And this sequence is pretty much directly from the game, where he sticks the knife in the one guy's knee and he goes, "Tell me or I'll pop your kneecap off." Yeah, that is straight from the game. And the moment that it builds up to where he stabs the dude in the chest and then comes over to the other guy and he's like, "You haven't asked me anything." He's like, "It's all right, I believe him."
Yeah. Joseph was saying at the beginning, it's like the "I am that guy" moment in the thing.
But I agree with what you're saying about Joel. Is the thing that has happened to Joel is that the heart of him got burned out, right? When his daughter died in his arms, the piece that made him human got charred into a little husk in that moment. And the reason he has survived and is able to be so successful in this world is the ruthlessness that left behind. When Joel stopped being like a human because, you know, his humanity got burned out in that moment, what was left behind was an utterly ruthless husk. And that's what Joel is. And now that Ellie's threatened, that she's been grabbed, he thinks these are the guys who grabbed her. That ruthlessness is all over this sequence. He doesn't give a fuck.
And now you know what people are talking about when they talk about Joel.
Yeah.
Now you know, now it
that
makes
guy
sense
be your
to me.
enemy would be very scary.
Yeah. And you know, now it's all clear to me. It all makes sense to me. So Joel sets out to find Ellie. He knows where she is, and she's in this little jail cell. And David sits down and he just puts the full court press on her with his manipulation, this weird paternalistic charm, all of these things. And he really wants to know her name. I think he asked her like 4 times, "What is your name?" And she wouldn't give it to him because it was almost like his access into her. It was almost like there was some, like he couldn't get through. And he's like, if he could just get a hold of that name, just get something personal from him. And their back and forth was great. But once he revealed what his interest in her is, you know, she's a 14-year-old girl and he's a grown man, and you see him it's like, even though it's hinting towards that. Yeah. Again, when we talk about great writing, whatever, then you flash back to all these things, and I flash back to him talking to that little girl, and he's like, "I'm your father," and then you're like, what has he been doing to these? You know, what did he do to that girl? What is the relationship with her, and why is James like thrown off by him and by that
exactly?
Thing? You know,
and you can see where some of that doubt is coming from.
Yeah, you see where that doubt and like what this thing is, and what you come to find out is like he doesn't respect these people.
No,
he thinks they're beneath them.
Well,
that they're there to serve him,
and he is playing a role to manipulate them that he doesn't actually believe.
Yeah. He's like, you know, they just need that religion stuff, you know, and he's like, that whole pastor thing is an act.
Yeah, but
you see me, and I see you, and you're like me. You have that monster in you.
Yeah, this all leads up to one of my favorite lines in the game, which I'm so happy that they kept it in the show. So now in the game, it's a little different. He comes up, he puts his hand on the bar like he does in the show, and he says, "You're a very special little girl." Or "You're a very special," not little girl, but he says, "You're a very special girl." And she comes up and she puts her hand on his like she does in the show. And then she grabs and snaps his finger. She says, "You go tell him I'm the special girl that just snapped your fucking finger." And I'm so happy they kept that moment in the show where like she seems like she's fallen for it. She seems like she's going along with it. She comes up, she puts her hands on his hand, and there's that moment where you're like, is he getting through to her? And then just snap, You can tell him I'm the cunt that just snapped your finger. And then she's like grabbing for the keys, you know. But what I loved about it is in both the show and the game, she's not doing this to just break his finger and prove some point. She actually has a plan. She breaks his finger and then tries to get the keys, right? She's trying to get out of there, which I loved.
And again, so it goes back to the whole fight consistency thing that we're talking about. So, you know, we've talked about other films or movies where it's like they fight in a way that's inconsistent with their character and their skill level kind of vacillates between whatever their challenge is. So they take a fight scene and that fight scene becomes like the more important than the consistency of the character. They want to draw it out and it be, you know, but what's great about this is that everything comes from their character, everything that we know about them. And the fact that she grabs his hand and throws him down because she has a plan to get the key, like her fierce, scrappy intelligence. And it comes, that is her survival mechanisms that under intense pressure, she outthinks everybody involved. And which brings me to like, I think the greatest moment in the episode is when they lay her down. And when he was walking out, he says, you know, his little pieces, chop you up in little pieces that we see. So now you know they eat people. And now you see the fucking ear on the floor. And they're like, they're going to chop her up and they're going to eat her. And they're holding her down. And she says, and she bites his hand. And she says, I'm infected. Now, for me, you know, it's like, it's another thing of like, oh, fuck. Like how, like I wasn't thinking, like I didn't predict what that was going to be for her to escape. And it was so smart, so, you know, and it's something that's been there the whole time. You forgot about it. And then you see his face and there's something so delicious about him being like, oh, fuck, like about the fear that he has. And then she takes that fucking cleaver and just rams it through James's neck and he hits the ground. That is great fucking writing.
And again, taken almost exactly from the game. That is that's how Ellie gets out of it in the game too, is she bites him, she says, I'm infected, he freaks out, she takes the cleaver and hits James with it. And then the sequence that follows that is almost directly from the game as well, which this is the moment in the show where she flees into the restaurant, the lodge, and he's following her with that cleaver, looking for her, and she's hiding and trying to stay away from him because, talk about fight consistency. That's the other thing. Ellie's a badass, but she's still a little girl, and she cannot physically overpower a grown man. She can't. Like you saw when she broke his finger and was reaching for the keys, he just grabbed her and banged her into the bars. He's bigger and stronger than her. There's no way around that, right? And so the sequence in the game is very much like the sequence in the show, which is, the building is burning down. She's trying to hide from him. He's looking for her. And what you're doing in the game, you're sneaking around to try to get behind him so that you can stab him when he's not looking. Because if he sees you coming, he just kills you. And they do that sequence great in the show where she's in this building. It's on fire. She's hiding. He's walking around looking for her. He's talking like, how did you do it? How did you survive? You need to teach me how you did that. Like he sees her as like an asset because like if he can figure out how she survived being bit, then that becomes like a tool for power, right? And then that moment where she does stab him, but he overpowers her and he's holding her on the ground and she's trying to crawl and get to the knife. That's all straight from the game. It's and the ending of the sequence where she gets on top of him with that cleaver.
Is that in the game too?
Just fucks him up.
But you're right, because there's something about him and when he's looking for his fascination with the fact that she didn't turn, that she's been bit. Yep. And also there's her fierceness and the panther that lives inside her. Like it's exciting to him. There's something very attractive to her for him. And then she kills the fuck out of him.
No, she kills him like 12 times.
You know what I
over.
love about that scene? That scene is like she's like just fucking chopping him to the point where you're like, okay, he's dead, and then she starts to slow down, and then she just picks him back up again, and it's like cutting his fucking head up, and and then you just want to see like what does that face look like, because Because at this point, you just want that guy to hurt. You want him to be dead. You want him to rearrange it. And it's such a cathartic moment. And everything that she's been through before the series started, all the way through the series, losing Riley, losing the tension, everything, it was just fucking just exploded in that moment. And her strength and her spirit defeated this guy.
Yeah. And as you pointed out, which I think you're 100% right, is she beats him with her cleverness. She doesn't karate him. She doesn't jujitsu him. She's not stronger than him or any of that. She doesn't overpower him. She's clever. She's smart. She hides. She waits till she can get behind him and stab him in the side with her knife. And even then, he knocks her down and she beats him because he keeps underestimating her.
Yeah, he never really takes her fully serious. But one thing that they did, which I knew that they would, and because how smart everything else is they didn't have Joel like bust in and save her.
And that is a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to talk about that. That's true in the game too. You have this moment in the game where you're playing as Ellie, and when she gets captured, you definitely it cuts back and forth with Joel going through the town trying to get to her. And so it definitely sets you up like, oh, Joel will save her. But then you play out the sequence in the burning restaurant where you save yourself, and then Joel comes in at the end. And I loved that they did that they don't take that moment away from Ellie, right? That this is her moment. This was her challenge. This was her struggle. She gets to be the one who sees it through for herself. And I loved that they did it. She kept
Joel alive. She found him medicine. She sewed him up. She dealt with all of these guys on her own, and she survived for Joel. And she never once, when she was in jail, when he was like, you're alone, she's like, I'm not alone. Like her fierce devotion and loyalty. So when she busts out of that house and she has the 1,000-yard stare, she's just been through the worst thing she's ever been in her life. And Joel comes up behind her. There is an emotional response when you're watching it, because that is a relationship that is well earned. And his tenderness to her, he called her baby girl. It was like the most tender that we've seen him since he's with his own daughter. And it's like they have crossed through they have stepped over the abyss, and they've found like a true connection and love for each other. And that's like pure love that they have in that moment for each other. And it's beautiful.
It's not the creepy pedophile love. This is the pure father and daughter love.
Did it sound like I was saying like,
No. I'm saying in contrast to the love David was offering her.
No. This is like true respect, father and daughter. We can rely on each other in this vast wasteland of the apocalypse. And it is rare to see a proper relationship go through an arc where you're fully moved by it, because it's how many times have you seen something and it's like, oh, this relationship's supposed to grow, and it just feels like paint by numbers, like they're just kind of growing, and then when they get together at the end, you're like, okay, but you could see them making another choice. It doesn't really. This one was so honest and authentic, and their relationship built out of their characters and the circumstances, that it's just you're fully moved by it,
Yeah, and I'm definitely not doing any spoilers here, but they needed to have this elevation of the relationship in order for the next episode to work. So this is such smart writing. And give credit to the Naughty Dog team that originally wrote this story, Neil Druckmann and his team.
I mean, Jesus Christ, these guys are fantastic. Just really.
Yes. And this moment with Ellie and Joel, where he's hurt and she has to save him, and where, she goes through, like you said, she goes through the worst thing she's ever been through in her life in this moment with David. And they come out the other side of it with Joel finally letting his last barrier down, right? I agree. When he says baby girl, that's what he called his daughter. That the last barrier is gone. He has fully accepted her in that role as a daughter figure. I mean, obviously you can never replace a lost child, so it's not like she's a replacement, but allowing her to occupy the same kind of space that his daughter did. That last barrier is down. And that will make the next episode
Have
work.
you ever seen a zombie show or movie that had this many emotional moments in it where it's like I mean, I don't know. We have a lot of pollen in Georgia right now, so there's just a lot of pollen in my house. There's so much pollen. Every time I watch Last of Us, I'm like, I was watching it with Jen, and I'm like, God, this pollen is just getting to me. Yeah,
this pollen.
She's like, the doors are shut. Yeah, it's pollen. It's just whatever.
Yeah, you're like, we should vacuum our house. It's so dusty in here.
But yeah, that was The Last of Us. This has been my favorite episode so far. I thought it was fantastic. Thought it was great.
I agree, and it is both my favorite part of the game and now my favorite episode of the show. And I'm not surprised by that. I expected that. And I'm paying it the highest compliment when I say I wish it had been 2 episodes, because I love this story so much. I just wanted it to be more. I just wanted it to be longer. That is not a criticism. That is out of love.
Please like and subscribe. Every time you ring a bell, Ty gets his wings. Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.